All right, just a couple of quick announcements. I did want to talk about our upcoming speaker for May 25th is going to be Howard Lurker. So he is one of our own Teaksons and our first guy speaker. So that's kind of exciting. And we also are going to have on June 12th, Joni Taylor, who is the A&M women's basketball coach. There might be a little additional surprise for that. So again, I strongly encourage you to attend in person. Also reiterating, this is such a great networking opportunity. You get to meet people from across the agency you might not normally get to interact with, but I'm starting to see some regulars. So that's kind of awesome. We're getting a crew. Also, I wanted to talk about, we did our second Habitat for Humanity build not too long ago. You might have seen it in Teaks Press. So thank y'all for those that volunteered and did that. Community service is a big thing for me. It's actually how I met Amy, our speaker today, when I was training to become a CASA, which she'll kind of explain what that is. But I remember Amy in training being somebody that I just really admired instantly and thought she was very calm and collected and very compassionate, and doing something that, you know, just is a tough job, and extremely intelligent also. It was my first impression. So please help me in welcoming Amy.
Thank you, Sarah. Thanks for having me. As Sarah said, my name is Amy Faulkner. I'm the executive director at Voices for Children. We are the CASA program for Brazos, Burleson, Grimes, Madison, and Leon counties. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what CASA is and how I got into this work. And so let me grab my clicker. Okay. Can y'all hear me okay in the back? Okay, not that well. I will try to speak up. My voice doesn't carry very well. So I'll do my best to speak loud enough for everybody to hear. But as I said, our organization is the CASA program for our 5-county area that we serve. And so our mission is to improve the lives of children in foster care through powerful volunteer advocacy, ensuring that each is placed in a safe and permanent home. And so that's a lot. Our mission statement, we're a volunteer-driven organization. So we rely heavily on volunteers to do the work that our agency does. And we work within the child protection system. So children and families who have come to the attention of CPS because of abuse or neglect. And so as I kind of look out at our group of folks, I am going to make the assumption that most of you probably haven't had a lot of overlap or engagement within that system. And that's okay. And some of you may have. Some of you may have had experiences growing up. Some of you may have had experiences within your own family of being a part of the child protection system. And so knowing that we all come from very different backgrounds, very different experiences. You know, some of us have a lot of experience and knowledge with the child protection system, but if you don't, it is a world and a system kind of within its own self. There are acronyms, there are experiences, there are lots of professionals involved in that system, and our program trains volunteers from the community. So people very much like yourself, Sarah went through our training and has been a CASA volunteer, who step up and say, I want to be an advocate for a child or a sibling group that's involved in the child protection system. We see a lot of value in having a volunteer, someone like yourself, a member of the community, step into that role. Somebody who often comes with fresh ideas, a fresh perspective, and a different way of solving a problem that needs to be solved. So our volunteers go through really extensive training. I'll talk a little bit about that in just a couple of minutes, but you know, Sarah went through our training. We didn't just send her out on her own and say, good luck, I hope it all works okay. Our volunteers go through a pretty extensive screening process. We want to make sure that you're a good fit for the program, for the role. go through 30 hours of training. And then you're paired with an advocate supervisor, and that supervisor walks you through that process. CASA's been around for a while. In our county or in our area, Voices for Children is the name of our organization, because BV CASA, the Brazos Valley Council on Alcohol and Substance Abuse, came in to our area in the 80s. And so everybody in our community knew what BV CASA was, and here we are, the CASA program. There was lots of confusion. And so in 1977, there was a judge in Seattle named David Sukup. He realized he was making lifelong impactful decisions for children and families with very little information. So he recruited some of his own friends to serve as what were the first CASA volunteers. Fast forward a little bit, in 1989, Texas, we had a couple of CASA programs that were independent CASA programs, but that's when Texas CASA was created. Texas CASA is our state agency that oversees each of the 73 independent 501c3 nonprofits that operate in the state of Texas. So we have a larger agency who provides standards for us, who provides training, they provide funding, so that our program can do the work that we do. In 2000, we had a group of volunteers in our community, or a group of community members, who recognized Brazos County was one of the larger counties in the state of Texas that did not have a CASA program. And so they got together, incorporated. In 2001, we trained our first group of volunteers. And then fast forward, here we are in 2022. We're now a 5-county CASA program. We served at one time 7 counties. Last year, we helped launch the 73rd CASA program in the state of Texas. So we used to serve Freestone and Limestone County, both of those counties. And that's like Mejia, Fairfield, Groesbeck. It's an hour and a half from Bryan College Station. We were serving those communities oftentimes with volunteers from this area. And so we had a couple of volunteers go through training, serve on several cases, and those volunteers, we got together with them and said, hey, I think it would be really beneficial if we could launch a program in your community. They were able to get financial support from both of the counties, which we were not able to successfully do here from Bryan College Station. So it just made a lot of sense. So I have been serving Voices for Children as the executive director since I started August 30th, 2021 as interim. But my time with Voices for Children goes back to 2005. And so when I moved to Bryan College Station, I was brought here by an Aggie. I'm from the Midwest, and met my now husband in Michigan working full-time at a camp. And he was like, I want to go back to grad school. And so we got married on a Saturday, moved here on a Thursday, and he started classes the next Monday. And so I was kind of thrown into Aggie land as a Midwesterner, and I was like, what in the world? Where did you bring me? But since that time, I have really grown to love this community. It is a generous community. It's a very caring community. Fell into the work at Voices for Children, found in the Eagle, there was a job posting, and I thought, hey, this could be a great thing. I applied for the position. My background is in education. I was a classroom teacher for 1 year. It was not a good fit for me. I love kids, I love families, but classroom management, as I said, my voice doesn't carry. I feel like my students could never hear me. For lots of different reasons, that wasn't a good fit for me, but I really enjoyed working with families and working with kids. I worked in full-time camping after teaching, great fit, lots of fun, lots of long work weeks. So we had kids on property 24 hours a day. So my job never seemed to end. When my husband and I got married, we moved here and I found Voices for Children. It brought together a lot of my passions as well as my skill set of working with children and families, as well as working with underpaid passionate college students within the camping world. So if any of you have sent your kids to camp or been a part of camp, there is a culture within camp that is a lot of fun. And Voices for Children brought those two things together for me. And I immediately fell in love with the work. My heart was broken for the children and the families that we served. And I think as I stepped into this world that I had no experience with, I worked with one of my first volunteers, Becca Simons. I don't know if any of you know her, but we sat in my office and she had been a volunteer for a while. And I asked her, why do you do this? And she said, well, I figure if the kids can live through this, I can be there to advocate for them. And that has stuck in my mind since then, that if the children that we're serving can live through this, we, as adults in their community who care about kids and families, can be there to walk them through this. And so that has continued to propel me. So 2005, started with Voices for Children. My husband graduated in May of 2006 and was not able to find a job in our community. So we moved to Dallas. I worked for the Dallas CASA program, which was great to get a different perspective of the same work in another community. In 2007, we weren't gone for very long. Bryan College Station is a bit of a vortex. We got sucked back in. And I got to come back to Voices for Children as the program director. There were some leadership changes. The executive director that had hired me moved on. The program director that I had worked with moved up, and they asked me to come back in a leadership position. And I jumped at the chance. Not only because of the work that we do and that I believed in it, but I also was expecting my first child, and I had the opportunity to bring my child to work with me the first year, which I think is a really unique perspective. And as a working mom who loved what I do, but also loved and cared about my family, it was a great fit for me. So was the program director until 2014. So it was there for just over 7 years. Lots in my family had changed by then. My husband had started his own business. We had our third child. And by the time we had our third child and he had a business, life was pretty hectic. I stepped away to take care of our family, was not gone for long, and found that being a stay-at-home mom was not the best fit for me. I love my children and my family, but I needed a little bit more. And so in 2018 was able to come back under AJ Reynolds as the training manager. When I was a program director, she was a volunteer coordinator or advocate supervisor with us. She became our executive director in 2017, was able to work with her in 2018 as the training manager. Great fit for me. I got to work part-time. I got to manage my own schedule. I got to train volunteers and get them ready to do this really difficult work. Did that until June of 2021 and stepped away again. Circumstances in my family had changed, circumstances at the organization had changed, and I needed to step away. During that time, the executive director at the time stepped away. So they called me on a Friday and I stepped in as interim on Monday of August 30th, 2021, and thought, sure, I can do this for 4 months until the end of the year. I was like, I can do that. Got into it and found that, again, I love this work. Applied for the position. They hired me in January of 2022. And here I am. I'm still doing it. And so, I share all of that with you all just to know that for me, this is work that has really had a huge impact on me, on my professional development. I never wanted to be the boss. I don't generally like to be in the spotlight and to be standing in front of a room full of people. But I believe in the work that we do. I believe in the work that our volunteers do. And I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to share that with a room full of people who may or may not have had any experience with the child protection system. And so a little bit about our agency. I've already talked about, we serve 5 counties. We've served 7 counties. We now serve 5 in 2022. So our fiscal year runs September 1 to August 30, 31st, we served 432 children. And we had 170 volunteers serving those kids. And they donated just over 9,000 hours. And so that's a lot of volunteer hours. They also drove over 88,000 miles throughout Texas in service to children and families that we served. And so that's a lot of work done by our volunteers. And so the way our agency is set up is that we have a staff who get paid to do this work, but in order to maximize our efforts, our staff supervise a group of volunteers. And so we have advocate supervisors who work with, they can work with up to 30 volunteers. I like to keep it 25, 23 is really manageable. But then those volunteers each work with one child or one sibling group. So if there's a group of 3 siblings that come to the attention of the department because of abuse or neglect and come into CPS care, our volunteers will serve that family. So we couldn't do the work that we do and be as effective without those volunteers. Woo. Okay, I've got a quick video. Do we have time to, can you hit play or do I need to hit it from here? Okay. So I want to just give you a little bit of an overview of what our CASA volunteers do. Whoops.
Every child is born with a chance to dream, to learn, to play, and a chance to feel safe. But what happens when those chances disappear? For children placed in foster care, the chaos of being removed from home and placed in a new environment with new people, court dates, social worker visits, and new schools can be traumatic and hinder a child's desire to learn, play, and even dream. How can we give these kids? How can we give them all the chances they deserve? For that, we need CASA volunteers. What is a CASA? A CASA is a court-appointed special advocate. They help kids in foster care know there's someone by their side, committed to looking out for them. A CASA is not a superhero or a legal expert. CASAs come from different backgrounds, neighborhoods, and communities, just like the kids they help. To be a CASA, you don't need any professional training in social work or the legal system. All you need is the will to help. If you decide to become a CASA volunteer, you'll be trained to work with children in foster care, navigate the legal system, and speak in court. Once you've gone through training, you're appointed by a judge to help with the child's case. As a CASA, your job is to get to know the child as well as the parents and family, foster family, and everyone else involved. Judges count on CASA volunteers to keep them updated so they can make the best possible decisions for their child's physical and emotional well-being. CASA volunteers are one constant figure for the child, but they're not the only ones. CASAs never work alone. When you become a CASA, you'll work with a CASA staff member who will advise and support you through the entire process. You'll work with caseworkers, attorneys, and others to engage committed adults who will support the child and family. These adults can include members of a child's family of origin, foster family, teachers, faith communities, coaches, and friends. Together, they create a strong support network for the child and family. This support system helps develop a plan and set goals for the child and family going forward. Ideally, the plan will involve reunification with the child's parent or parents when safe and possible. When that's not the case, you may recommend that the child live with another relative or close family friend. Other possibilities may include searching for a loving adoptive home or preparing the child for adult living on their own. Regardless of the outcome, you'll keep in contact with the support network you've helped create until the case closes, so that everyone continues to put the best interests of the child first. If this support group stays committed, the child will have strong, stable adults who they can rely on for years to come. This leads to a greater sense of safety, happiness, and stability, better performance in school, and stronger peer relationships. There are thousands of children in foster care throughout Texas. By becoming a CASA volunteer, you can make sure they are safe and supported. Because every child has a chance. It's you. Find out more about how you can help by visiting becomeacasa.org.
The best way to burn fat and get shape is not just
Okay, not exactly seamless, but all right. So that's just a little glimpse of what our CASA volunteers do. And when a child comes to the attention of CPS because of abuse or neglect, the goal, almost all of the time, is family reunification. How do we help the family address the issues that brought their child to the attention of the department so that we can reunify that child with their family? Kids do best when they're with their family. The state does not make a good parent. Our goal is to get kids out of the system, if at all possible, as quickly as possible. And so our CASA volunteers are in the midst of doing this really hard work of connecting families with resources, helping to connect the kids with their family. So sometimes kids come into care and their extended family doesn't even know what's going on. And so how can we help provide and build a support network for that family so that family can keep their kids within the family? So our CASA volunteers do a lot of different things. They wear a lot of different hats. So they are independent fact gatherers. So our volunteers are out talking to anyone and everyone they feel like has valuable or important information. And we take that information and we write that up into a court report and we submit those reports to the court. There are about 5 hearings in the life of a case over a 12-month period. Our volunteers monitor orders of the court. So they're checking in, making sure that things are moving forward. The Child Protective Services workers that we work with, the CPS workers, they are generally very caring, very loving folks who do not have enough resources to do the things that they are asked to do. There is a lot of changes coming in the child protection system. And so our local units here in Brazos County are having a hard time keeping staff because of the stress of the job, because of potential changes coming with what's called community-based care. I don't know if any of you are following what's been going on in the news and in the media with the lawsuit that's been going on in Texas, but there are some big changes coming for the state of Texas in regards to child protection. So our volunteers monitor those court orders. When a judge says, hey, we're going to increase visits because mom and dad are doing what they need to be doing and we need to work on getting these kids back home. That's great, but the logistics behind all of that, increasing those visits and adding visits, is another hurdle that the caseworkers got to figure out. And so we're there to help them make sure, keep that on the forefront of their minds, ask those questions. What's the plan? How is this going to happen? When is it going to happen? Keep things moving forward. We also monitor the children in their placement. So our volunteers go and see the kids wherever they're placed. And so when a child comes into care, they might be placed with a relative and they might be placed with grandma who's able to provide them a safe, stable home. And grandma may live here locally, but grandma might also live in San Antonio. And if she's an appropriate caregiver, our volunteers will go to San Antonio and see those kids. They might be placed in a foster home in Waco because that's where there's an opening right now. And that's the place that will take 3 kids, between the ages of 4 and 6 in that home. Our volunteers work collaboratively with all of the parties. So there are lots of people involved in the child protection system. When the kids come into care, they get an attorney. So there's an attorney assigned to the children. Oftentimes the parents are assigned an attorney. There'll be a CPS caseworker that's working with a family. And then eventually there will be service providers that are working with the family to provide them services. If the kids are school aged, there'll be teachers in the school system that we'll work with. If the kids have any medical needs, our volunteers will talk to those medical providers. Sometimes our volunteers go to those appointments depending on what the medical needs are. And so our volunteers have, we as an agency serving in the role that we serve, have access to the child's information as a parent does. So their medical records, their school records. So we gather all of that information so that we can make recommendations to the judge for the child and for the family. We help build connections to help support the child and to support the parents. And then we advocate for the child's best interest. And sometimes that ends up being advocating for the family, to bring the family back together when the parents are addressing their issues and shown that they can provide a safe, stable home for their kids. How are we funded? I like to answer this question because we are, so our budget this last year was just over $1 million. And about 12% of that comes from local giving. And so we've got a really generous community. We've got folks who on a regular basis every month give to Voices for Children to support the work that we do. We do fundraising events. We just had our big gala in March. We do a golf tournament in the fall. We have a group of college students, the Thetas. Their national philanthropy is Voices for Children. They do a 5K every spring, Parents Weekend. And I'll tell you, those ladies raise a lot of money for us. And we're really grateful for them. About 45% of our funding comes from government funding, and that is an area we are trying to diversify our funding sources. We receive money from Texas CASA through 2 different grants, VOCA, Victims of Crime Act, which is a federal grant, and then CVC, Crime Victims Compensation. So Texas CASA provides the 73 CASA programs in the state of Texas some base funding from those funding sources. And then we receive funding from each of the counties that we serve. So Brazos County provides us funding, Burleson, Grimes, Leon, Madison. And then we receive some private grants and foundations. So we apply for grants and we have organizations, private organizations that will fund us. And so we try to keep our administrative costs low to utilize the funds that we're receiving to do the work that we're being asked to do. And so, you know, as I said, my education background is in education. This is running a business. And so I've had to learn a lot about how do we be good stewards of the funds that we're given. I want to make sure that my staff is being efficient, that we're doing good work, and that we're, being good stewards of the funds that we're earning and being given. So, you know, when Sarah asked me to come and speak, she's like, a part of what we do is about community service and presenting those options to you all. And so, you know, being a CASA volunteer, I'll be honest, it's not a role that everybody can step into. It's not a good fit for everyone. But there are other ways that you can be involved if you're interested. And so serve on a committee. If you like to golf, if you golf and you're interested in helping the golf tournament, we are looking for people who golf that enjoy golfing that would like to be a part of that committee. Become a donor. That would be a great way. Sponsor a child. So we do a school clothing drive. In the summer, we provide 2 new outfits for all of the kids that we serve because everybody deserves to feel good on their first day of school. And so we provide school clothing for them. We do a Christmas holiday toy drive as well. And if it's not getting involved with Voices for Children, there are other organizations in our community that we partner with that work with and serve our families. And so BCS Together is another great organization. We partner with them when we have a need, a physical, tangible need. So a kid comes into care and they're placed with a foster placement or with relatives. And sometimes our kids come with nothing. And so our CASA workers can go to the BCS closet, they can get diapers, they can get clothes, they can get car seats and take those to the caregivers. And so there are some other organizations, BCS Together being one, Child Protective Services. If you have, there are times where people will go and volunteer and just be in the office, file paperwork, help answer the phones, do things that the caseworkers need a little bit of additional support with. So there are ways to get involved and become a foster parent. That might be something that, if you really want to serve children and families, we need more foster homes in our area. Renaissance Family Services is an agency in our home that licenses foster parents. And so there are lots of ways that you can get involved, but I think, you may be saying, oh gosh, I don't feel like any of this is a good fit for me, but you might know somebody as well. And so I think it's really important that we as a community are aware abuse and neglect happens here in our community, and that there are things that we can do to help support the children and the families and the agencies that are working with those families to help address their issues and bring those families back together. We always encourage people to stay aware and engaged in what we're doing. So we're on social media. If you're on social media, like us, follow us, engage with us through social media, comment on our posts, ask us questions. We would love to get you plugged in. We would love to find a way for you to serve if you feel like that's a good fit in something that you want to do. And if you don't, that's okay too. I hope that you would be open to, again, just being aware. There are children in our families here in our community that are experiencing abuse and neglect and need our community to be aware. So that's all that I have. Do y'all have any questions for me? Yeah, Sarah.
I wanted to ask, how do you deal with, everybody has hard days, right? So, when you personally have a hard day and then you're dealing with people on their worst days, what's kind of something that you utilize to tackle that?
Yeah. So when I first started in this work, I remember driving down George Bush, having a conversation with my husband, and I'm in the car crying because that was my first experience of really, like, you're reading on paper these really awful things that have happened to children and families. And he's like, hey, do we need to find a counselor for you? And so, yeah, like I've gone to counseling, and that secondary trauma is real. And so ensuring that I'm taking care of myself, that my staff is taking care of themselves. We provide for our volunteers an errand share. And so we have one of our board members provides an opportunity for our volunteers to get together and just talk about the hard things on their cases. Personally, I exercise, taking a walk, getting outside, engaging with my family and being really present. So when I'm not at work, I really have to you got to turn it off, which is not easy. I'm also type A personality. I'm pretty driven and I'm going to get the job done. I don't know if it's just being older, wiser. I'm not really sure, but I've gotten to a point in my life where sometimes I say, I just have to take a break and step away because the work's still going to be there. When I come back the next day, the work is still going to be there and it has to be done. And so we talk a lot in the office about self-care, making sure that we're taking care of ourselves, making sure that at the end of the day, you're leaving because we want you to come back tomorrow and to be able to pick up. And so it it is a challenge, and it's the secondary trauma is real, it's a thing. And so we try to be aware of where everybody's at. And crying is good. I just came from a Texas CASA training, and we had a speaker talking about self-care, and she's like, did you know that when you cry, your body releases toxins? Which that was new information to me. I'm also a crier, and so if I can have a good cry in my car while I'm driving home, that can be very helpful. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have 2 questions online. First one is, besides the 30-hour training, how long does the volunteer training / qualifying process take?
Yeah, great question. So first, there's an information session. So everybody who is interested in learning more about CASA, we ask them to come to an information session. And then there's an application. So submitting an application online, there's an interview process. And then once you're accepted into training, then training is a continued evaluation, both for you and for us, to make sure that the role's a good fit. And so it is a lot of time. Our training is generally 2 evenings a week for 4 weeks. And so from 5:30 to 9. So we're asking a lot of time of you, and then you do 3 hours of court observation, then you're going to write a court report. So it's a lot of time up front. But that training is a time for you and for us to evaluate to make sure it's a good fit, because we don't ever want to put somebody on a case and 3 weeks into it, they decide, oh my gosh, this is not what I thought it was going to be. And so when you finish training, if you go through training and we assign you to a case, you're going to be paired with an advocate supervisor. That is a staff person who that's what their job is to support you through that case. And so they do the first of everything with you. First time you go visit the kids, the first time you talk to the parents, the first time you call CPS, they'll be there with you. And then we'll continue to support you. They'll meet with you every month. You're going to have a case review with your advocate supervisor, and that's a time to go over your case. Where have we come from? What did you do this month? What questions do you have? What do we need to be doing to continue to move the case forward to work towards permanency for our kids?
Also, quick interjection, TEAGS provides about 5 hours a month for CASA specifically, just FYI.
So the second question is, what is the average time commitment for volunteers?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. And it varies. So when a volunteer takes a new case, it's going to be more time intensive at the beginning. And so just getting up and going, meeting with your supervisor, reading over the case file, accepting the case, making all of those initial first contacts. Usually the first hearing is within sometimes days of being appointed up to 4 weeks. And so there's a lot of work to do at the very beginning. And then, we tell volunteers 15 to 20 hours per month on average. Many of those things can be done at a time that works for you. So a lot of times it's email communication. So sending emails to the CPS caseworker, to the caregivers, to the school to gather information. The things that take the longest amount of time are visiting your kids. So traveling to wherever they are. If they're here locally, that's not going to take as much time. But traveling to wherever they are, spending time with them, coming back home, and then court. So preparing court reports and writing court reports, and then sometimes being in court. Some hearings might be 5 or 10 minutes, but if there's contested issues and if people are not in agreement, the court hearings can go on for a little bit longer. I mean, an hour, unless it's a trial. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
So my mother-in-law fostered from like 03 to 2018, somewhere roughly around that time. So I was kind of familiar with the foster system. After being with getting together with my husband, I went through about 30 kids at the time that she stopped for that. But I never really knew this side of things. So when y'all are going through the cases and your goal is to put the kids back with their parents, but if that's not the end result, how are you guys involved? Do you have a stay in placement, homes if the kids don't go back to their parents and if they get, they're being fostered?
Yeah.
Because I know my mother-in-law, she would I mean, how many kids she had through the years, one of the last couple of kids, you know, they tried placing her in a couple of different homes and it didn't work out, but is that advocate, is they get a say where the kids go to? And what homes and what the criteria will be, or are they just there specifically like for the court side and going right up and.
Yeah, that's a great question. So our volunteers are a part of that process. So, and I will give you an example. So we had a gentleman who was serving on a case. The two little girls, they came into care, they were 3 and 5. He stayed on that case until those kids were adopted, 2.5 years. So went through the process of working with a family in hopes of reunifying. That did not work. There were no appropriate family members that were identified or available to take the kids. And so these kids moved into the adoption process. And so when they had what's called the adoption selection, this gentleman was sitting at a table with several CPS folks, and he was the only person in the room who had ever met the kids. And so they're reading over applications of families who were interested in adopting, and he got to be a part of that selection process to pick the family that, based on the children that he knew, he felt like they would do best in this home. And then was there when the children were placed, and was at their adoption, and continued to maintain contact with that family for a while afterwards. But yeah, that is an opportunity where in a system that is often, we have people who are changing, who are, you might find a new job, you might decide that this is not a good fit for you. Caseworkers are changing, but not only that, when it moves to adoption, it moves to a whole different unit. And so they get a new caseworker. That caseworker had not met these kids when they were doing the adoption staffing. And this volunteer really got to make a difference and speak into and help select that family. So great question. Yeah.
Just how do you go about sponsoring for a holiday or back to school?
Yeah, so we push all of that out through our social media. And so in fact, we are starting to plan for our back to school clothing drive now, which school's not even out, but we're telling our volunteers, hey, you got to get the list. What do your kids want for the fall? And so our volunteers will do shopping in June and the beginning of July, so that our volunteers can deliver that stuff in July and August. And so we'll have a sign up that we'll post on Facebook and Instagram. You can email our office and say, hey, I'm interested in shopping for a kid, and we'll just match you with a kid. And you can go buy that. You can get on Amazon, have it delivered to our office, or Target, have it delivered to our office. And then we'll get it out to the kids. So, yeah. Yes, ma'am.
So you mentioned a lot of different ways that part of this. In our family business, we do power washing for corporate and residential property, cleaning for residential and commercial property. So we're very much acts of service. So we grew up in Navasota, so we power washed the entire Rattler Stadium, a lot of the school districts, like playgrounds, we did that. So as a kind of corporate sponsorship, would you have a need for something like that?
That is a great question.
Or how, what ways?
Yeah. So we do have businesses that partner with us. And so I don't have an example for power washing off the top of my head, but we have some businesses that have helped sponsor our golf tournament, have sponsored or provided volunteer appreciation type gifts and things that we do for our volunteers. So yes, there are some things. And we have if we have a family that has a need, then we can work through BCS together to help connect a family with a service provider in town. So yes, that is something that we could help with. We don't directly provide that information, but we can work with BCS together to do that. Yeah. Other questions?
Protection to the volunteers. So I'm guessing children are forcibly removed from the home.
Mhm.
Those parents are probably aren't the happiest with
Mhm.
your
More volunteers.
Mhm.
And then volunteers going to their home to pick them up or whatever. What's the protection guarantee? Security?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. And so I can tell you that we've been doing this since 2001. We've never had any volunteers that have been physically hurt, injured, or anything like that in the work that we do. Now, I am also going to say that there is some risk in working with families. We're working with families who have substance abuse issues, have oftentimes untreated mental health issues of domestic violence. So we talk with our volunteers a lot about being wise and being aware of what
Hey, I hope it's back up.
into. We
I don't
don't.
know. I don't have high hopes today.
So our volunteers aren't going to the home and picking up the kids and taking the kids anywhere. So our volunteers, we do ask that they communicate with all of the parents involved on a case on a monthly basis. So, and that's generally there's mom, there might be more than one dad, and that might be through email, that might be through text messages, that might be through phone calls. And so a lot of our volunteers use their own personal phones. We have volunteers who have set up Google phone numbers to use that Google phone number. And so, we do caution our volunteers and to be aware. Hey, if you drive up to mom's house and you were going to have a visit with her and you see dad's car in the driveway and dad is not supposed to be there, just drive on by, call her and tell her, hey, something came up, I need to reschedule this meeting. So you're also going to have your advocate supervisor who's going to be doing the first of everything with you. And if you're concerned about safety, to have those conversations with your volunteer, with your advocate supervisor. Hey, I'm really concerned about going out to this place. Can you come with me? Yes, I will go with you. And so, if parents are not addressing their issues, if they're not making progress, we're not going to send you out to their house to check in on them, because if they're not addressing the issues that brought their kids into care, and we're not considering returning the kids home at this time, we're not going to ask you to put your safety in jeopardy. So, yes, sir.
So, do you have a feel for how much actual personal contact a volunteer might have with kids? Let's say if it's a year long thing.
Yeah, so a minimum of once a month. So our job is to be an advocate for the child. But to do that advocacy, we're gathering information from lots of different sources. So the child is one source of the information that we're gathering. I tell people we're not a mentoring program. We're not big brothers, big sisters. Your job is not to go and get that child and take him out for ice cream and go to the movies and have a great time. We want you to build a relationship with that child and get to know that child so that you can have an understanding of what does that child want and what does that child need? Because those are the things that we're going to be advocating for. And you do that by getting to know the child, but getting to know the extended family, by getting to talk to the teachers and finding out, what do the teachers know? What's going on? What are their concerns? What is the child really good at? What areas is the child struggling in? And then we're going to advocate for that child to make sure that the child's needs are being met.
How do people that you're interacting with, let's say a teacher or others, know that the volunteer is operating in a efficient capacity?
Yeah, so we have a court order that appoints our agency as the guardian ad litem. And then we have assigned you as the volunteer on that case. And so we have a letter that goes with it. And so most schools at this point, CASA has been around long enough. Most schools know who we are. And so providing that court order and providing that letter, you'll have a CASA ID badge, and that generally gets you in with whoever you need. Yeah. So great questions. Any others?
We have another question.
Yeah.
So many children from different language variations. How do you gain a volunteers with the language barrier? How many volunteers do you have that are multilingual?
Yeah. So generally what we see in our community is families who speak Spanish. We do have some volunteers who speak Spanish and we try to assign them to those cases. And so the question we always ask is, do the kids speak English? Because we can have a volunteer assigned to, if the kids speak English and the parents don't speak English, sometimes it's easier to get a translator to help with the communication between the parents. And then we don't have to worry about that with the kids. But we do have volunteers who speak Spanish. We have not had an issue, or we haven't had any cases that we've served where the parents speak anything other than Spanish or English in our program. So. Any other questions?
Just like Sarah was saying, TEACS does extend out to always 5 hours a month. And it's not your sick or your vacation leave that you have to pull from. It's a separate type of leave that you're allowed.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for highlighting that. Yeah. Thank you for your time. Thanks for allowing me to be here. Thanks for inviting me, Sarah. I really appreciate y'all and taking time to hear from me.
Thank you so much, Amy. One of the things I heard from you was your passion is what motivates you every day on making an impact. And I hope there's some TEACS or Forest Service or TTI folks who can take away from that and feel that too in their careers. We have 2 dates that are secured that I want y'all to put on your calendar. May 25th is our next speaker, and it's our first guy to come speak to us. So I'm really excited. He is going to come share stories of 3 women who have impacted his life. I think the title he gave me was How Empowering Women Change Lives. And he shared some of the stories of what he's working on for that. He's out at our San Antonio facility. He has not been with TEACS long, so it's your chance to get to know someone. And he shared some of the stories, and he's actually writing a book he hopes to publish one day on life stories from Howard. Joni Taylor is coming to speak June 12th. I think both of those are in this room, right? Yeah. She is finishing up her 2nd year as the A&M women's basketball coach, and she was voted the 2021 SEC Coach of the Year. So we need to show up in support of her and welcome her to the community. I know she's still getting adjusted to Bryan College Station, but she's really excited to come talk to TEACS. So mark those dates down. There are some materials at the back on CASA that Amy brought, so be sure and grab some stuff and stickers. And stickers for your. So thank y'all for coming.